Hello, this is Kent Boyer with DuPont Pioneer Forage Additives. Today we're working on a Claas self-propelled forage harvester, and we're going to explain how to source the power for a Appli-Pro Intell in the cab of a Claas harvester. Good. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the panels. One thing, this armrest, there's a lever here. We can pull the lever and that armrest will raise up out of our way. The top cover, so we'll pull that out, set that out of the way. Then we'll also remove this Claas cover, okay, and that exposes our relay board here. Okay, now our next step is going to be to quarter turn. There's a bolt here and there's one at the other end of the board. We quarter turn those, and that allows that board to flip up. Whatever you do, do not put your finger on the bottom side of that when you rotate those bolts. That has a like a cross pin in it, and that can pinch your finger. So just take a number 13 socket, quarter turn each one. That board will raise up, and what that does, that allows us access to some large stud bolts in the back of this relay board. Okay, underneath on the back side here, that we can use to attach our power supply. Okay, so we're inside this Claas harvester and we've got the relay board here. One thing before we flip the board up, if you look here, there's a bolt head available. There's the nut for that bolt. You can actually back that bolt out, and that is a good location to use for your ground wire from your main power harness, and as well your ignition harness. So the two harnesses that I'm talking about are going to be the gray ignition harness here that would have a green and a black wire. We'd attach the black wire to this bolt that I'm talking about. We would also attach from our main power harness, we've got our red and our black. We're going to attach that black eyelet underneath that bolt head. If we go ahead, remove those cables out of the way, we're going to flip up this relay board. Just be cautious that nothing's hanging up on there. When we look underneath, you can see these large power lugs right here. That has battery power available. So the red wire from our power harness, okay, with the big red fuse holder here, trying to get it in the shot, but the big red fuse holder, that red eyelet we can put right underneath. Remove this nut from this bolt and put that underneath and tighten it back down, and that should be an excellent supply of power for the Intell applicator. Okay, we're back here with the Claas self-propelled forage harvester. We're in the cab again. Now we're going to describe how to connect that ignition harness. You've got the green wire with the black fuse holder, and as you can see in this machine, we've sourced our ignition power from this relay position, and what we found is, in many times, that relay is missing. It's KO 13.1. If you'll notice what they've done here, they've removed the eyelet and they've just put a spade connector on, and we just plug it right into that relay position, and that is the keyed power that would actually turn that relay on if it were in place. But since we don't use that, we can source our ignition power for that, as it's a very low amp draw and will not cause any issues. Plus, we still have our fuse in line to protect our system. Okay, here on the Claas self-propelled forage harvester, one other thing we're going to talk about is connecting for the yield monitor to a variable rate apply. And this system has a Trimble system on this harvester, and so what we're going to do, the Pioneer integration kit is going to be a cable like this that has two connectors. You're going to locate one that's going to be labeled with the R2 Claas can. He's going to be plugged into this guy here, which, let's see, I'm not sure if you can see a label there, but son of a gun, that label is X485.1. here on this plug. But anyway, we're just going to separate those two, and the Pioneer integration cable will have one male, one female plug, and so you'll just basically interrupt that loop. But that will allow the CAN signal to pass on through, but allow the Intell to pick up the information. One thing to note as well on newer Claas harvesters, I believe you're thinking, you know, we're talking like 2017, maybe even 2016 and newer. The end of row plug, that white T-shaped plug that used to be on the older machines, is located on the back side of the cutter head there. They've moved that plug into this area. So if you can't find the plug, that white T-shaped plug on the back of the machine in the service area, look in this compartment here behind this relay board. The newer machines, I found that they've moved that plug into that compartment. Okay, one more thing on this Claas unit while we're working here. It's always a good idea, you know, I talk about the power lugs that are on the bottom side of this relay board here in the back. It's always a good idea to disconnect those battery cables first before you start working in here, because those lugs are hot, and if the wrench or the ratchet that you're using to loosen that nut or tighten it, you know, whatever, if that touches any of this framing, this metal framing here that holds the circuit board or anything down in the bottom of the cab here, it's going to short. So good rule of thumb is just go ahead and disconnect that you know, that negative post from the battery, you know, the ground, and that should reduce any chance of anything shorting out while you're working on this. Okay, we're in the service area, this self-propelled forage harvester, the Claas here, and one thing I wanted to touch on was the end of row wire. This is required to operate with the yield monitor. So when we tie in that harness in the cab there to allow for variable rate application, we also send in that kit this green end of row wire, and that has to be connected as well to initiate, you know, the start stop. On I believe it's 2016 Claas harvesters, this T-shaped plug is located here on the back side of the cutter head here, the blower. Some of the earlier machines, it was down, you know, a little lower, and you used to have the automatic lubricator, and then you'd have that plug. Now they've moved that lubricator away, and you've got this plug available here. On I think it's 2017 and newer, you're going to find that plug, okay, that T-shaped plug like that will be actually in that power box, inner power junction box that's in on the cab floor. And so that's where we would actually have to route this wire through the bulkhead fitting here that you see in the back. You'd have to take those bulkhead plates out, run your wires through, which you'll have. That's my recommendation, is if you can do that with the harnesses for the Intell as well. A lot of times, I'm not sure if she can get around there, but you can see these little plugs that'll come out, and you can route your Intell harness through those plugs, and that just helps keep everything dust free, and it prevents us from having to run cables through the window. Now, if the operator is good with that, that's fine too, but I think these bulkhead plates are a nice clean way to go about the installation. But again, just keep that in mind, that's where the end of row plug is on a 2016 and older, and again, if you get into new machines, you're going to find that plug not here on the back, but it'll actually be in the cab.